Thank you for your attention, ladies and gentlemen. So, after the conversations that you have just had, we asked you to choose a reporter for each group, so there should be 6 reporters, if our maths is correct. So would anyone like to volunteer to share what their group discussed first, or should I choose someone?
Can I come up first, because I have to go
Please do.
back to 7 days and relieve someone. So I'm just going to do it quickly for our group. So what the conversation that came up was a lot in relation to lack of certainty. In terms of like older generation being uncertain even with what they knew to be true, and really questioning that with the younger generations being so different. And then the lack of certainty with the younger generations and the nihilism, that, you know, the belief that maybe anybody could tell them anything and they would nearly fall for it. And the difference with respect to the acknowledgement that the elements of the virtues maybe of like kindness and being compassionate with friends was still very much there, but for no other real reason. So there's still that kind of a connect, but increasingly worried about the disconnect within society. We mentioned in particular with the technology and the distraction, the challenge for young ones to even kind of remove themselves from that world to truly engage eye to eye with humans as opposed to virtual beings. And so with that, we just finished, we were saying about sharing a story. My eldest kid was at school and he came home one day and he thanked us for being bothered with the hassle of him. And we were like, what do you mean? So we went to school. They're not allowed gadgets in our house, they don't have Xboxes or phones, and they're allowed some screen time on Friday and Saturday. So he had always been into school telling his woes, and then his friend James turned around and said to him, well, I have an Xbox and I have a PlayStation and I have a mobile phone, and I have all of this, that and the other. And he says, but it's because my mum and daddy can't be bothered with the hassle of me. And he realised that, you know, at 10 years of age, this kid had worked it out, that he was being given the stuff because the mummy and daddy didn't really want to listen to the apple or the fighting or the making the boundaries. And so our 10-year-old came back thanking us for being bothered with the hassle of him. So in a roundabout way, I suppose it's a challenge, even for the adults, to be bothered with the hassle of the younger generations who are so distracted, so disconnected, and really absorbed with this nihilistic world where they think they have the answers to the problems, but they're actually really deeply sad in the midst of the disconnect. So I hope I've covered.
Drop the mic.
And yourself, George?
Oh, me? Oh, okay. Our group was, we actually introduced ourselves, had a good little chat about things. We came from a quite diverse group of people with a range of different experiences. And we ended up talking about our experience of not recognising so much the boundaries between the different churches, but actually seeing that quite often we realised that we all had the same one God. That's where we were sort of coming from. We had a sense that eventually there was too much being done with propping up the buildings of the church, and not necessarily propping up the people of the church. And that was a core sort of theme that sort of popped out. And I think there was also this sense of searching that was going on now that a lot of people were having, regardless of where they were in the early parts of their journey. And when we did ask them about meaning, we did come back to the sense of, well, we're Christians, and we think that's where we're at the moment. I'm just trying to think, there's a couple of stories that we haven't missed out. There was a sense of who are we, and we did get this sense of, if we looked too much inwardly, we became very self-centered in the very way we're looking. But the more we could look outwardly and stop focusing on us and focus on the other people, then we had a better connect with those other people and a sense of community as opposed to who we think we are as individuals. So hopefully I've covered that okay. Is that right, Rebecca?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
This is punishment for taking notes. So yeah, our group was varied as well. So one thing that came out was that our faith has to be lived from the inside out. that if it's merely reduced to external kind of habitual compliance without becoming internalized, it's just not going to carry the day. There was some concern about our churches equipping parents to disciple their kids, to live in their moment versus their parents' moment. Their parents' moment is past, but to help the parents make Jesus apprentices out of their kids for their moment. We talked a little bit about progress in terms of the agro farming thing, kind of trying where do we step in and try to turn back the system, or at least confront the system. And there was some varying views on can this be done, should it be done, but one thing that we did agree on was that we should be globally aware but locally responsible. We are responsible for our patch. Then the last thing we talked a little bit about was rebuilding trust for our faith in our culture. This is not going to be easy. We cannot talk our way out of a problem that we acted our way into. So it's going to take some time, and it's going to take a lot of confession to the core, nothing hidden, nothing kept back, come clean, own what we've done, and then suffer the consequences and move on. That's it.
Yeah, yourself, thank you.
Right. So sorry to say we cheated. We had a priest in our group, so Robert, it's all new. No, we had a pretty whirlwind tour, and I think we pretty much figured it all out.
Tell us.
I know. No, we mostly touched on this notion of freedom and radical freedom, and this kind of Luciferian energy that had been growing in the world, and getting the philosophical roots of that and stuff. And we also touched upon the kind of stratification of different levels of getting understanding your faith. Like Joy there was talking about her boyfriend having much more of a understanding towards faith sort of perspective, and Joy having a faith and then understanding, you know, sort of it's where you start, dictates where you end kind of thing. And I sort of we were getting to the heart of this kind of, as I say, this radical freedom and loss of limits. I know Paul talks about an awful lot. With a few little inputs from David there. Where's David? There he is. About, what are you talking about, David? There was a great point you made, I forget it.
Was that Adam?
About Adam, basically about he was talking about Adam coming from this Greek word.
Basically what happens is we use the Bible in English.
Yes.
And the Bible was written in Hebrew. And we talk about the first man has been Adam. Adam comes from the Hebrew word Adama, which means earth. And every time you refer to Adam in Hebrew, you understand you're talking about earth. And then about the two creation stories, one 6 days, God rested the 7th. And then the other one where dust and God breathed into the nostrils of man and man came out of a being.
There you go. So just the way that these things come down to us, and we can interpret these things the way that they were meant in the first place, and that whole confusion that arises from, I guess, the correct interpretation of these things, which we don't really think exists, but you know, there's no real. This is all intellect kind of trying to grasp something which it's not. It wasn't made for you, kind of thing. So that was sort of the gist of it.
Thanks very much. Should have two more reporters, yeah?
Most importantly, we had a furious debate about who was the best dressed panelist today. And there was further controversy about who had the best facial hair.
I can't believe I didn't get to hear that. Are you handing out prizes?
Yes,
Oh,
I have a bag full
Oh
of
dear.
virtual prizes. I think there was 3 points that really occurred with us, some that overlapped with other groups. There was one point made about for some people who, let's say, were moving closer towards some concept of being Christian, and the difficulties that they had with broaching that topic with certain people because of various connotations and preconceptions, and particularly in a northern context with maybe a history of particularly strident views, a lot of condemnatory attitudes as well. So that was one thing. Second thing I think was, while we all brought together here because of internet experiences, it was very, very important to have face-to-face contact and face-to-face articulation and shared views. And I think the point that was most crucial with our group was technology and our children, touching upon, I think, what Paul said, you know, be the person that you want your children to be. And for some of us in our group who have kids, and for the people who are considering their potential future kids, there was a lot of concern about what the world offers them and how to negotiate the relationship with technology as well. I think that was it.
One more, is that right? Yeah.
We covered a lot, so we did. We were primarily talking about what struck us, and a lot of people, there was a lot of things that both Pauls had said about technology and about their stories and how they came to the faith. And we were also talking about navigating the culture and realizing that the culture out there is kind of has changed wholly, and it's almost like a different. It's almost like you could go somewhere and it's a different planet. So it was a little bit like that. And there was talk about. Well, I was of the opinion that in some ways we have to keep our head down, and kind of like you guys were talking about, that it's the church is sort of underground now in a way, and there's sort of a culture of fear in some way. But a lot of, I don't think, some people are going to go that we need to kind of stand up at the same time. So, you know, I was just thinking about the difficulties of expressing your opinions in certain places. You know? What else have I missed? We talked a lot about technology and about the effect it has on people and on us, and how it affects our brains, and also about being wary about things that we watch and see and do, and things that we ingest, basically, because it becomes part of us. Have I forgotten anything? There was a lot of music coming up. I didn't take notes, I got given the job. You're doing it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, folks, both for your input, work that you did there at the end, and for your attentiveness and efforts coming here today. I most appreciate it as someone trying to make this happen after our conversations online over the last few years, and it's been everything that I sort of hoped for. So it's a testament to you all, and to Paul's and John, staff, the cafe and beyond. So thank you all, and I just want to ask if you each have some closing words, and then if you start yourself, Paul.
Where's Paul? Paul versus Paul. Okay. Yeah, it's really interesting, this, isn't it? I suppose I'm thinking 2 things. I was thinking about what was just said there about the underground church and standing up. It's very interesting. You can be. I think Martin Shaw said this to me recently. He said you can be almost anything in this culture except a Christian. Right? That's the thing they really don't like. I was a Wiccan, right? I was a witch. My mum was fine with that. She was very concerned when I became a Christian. She didn't understand it at all. She was fine with me being a Buddhist or an atheist or whatever. I definitely got some rude emails when I first wrote about being a Christian from various people who swore they were never going to read me again, which was fine. But there is. This is a. I think it was Philip Reed, American philosopher, who called this an anti-culture. We live in an anti-culture, which is a phrase I really like. Okay, so all the elements that actually go to make up a human culture, which might be your vision of the sacred, your understanding of the shape of the universe, the kind of the social order that you live in, your sense of nationhood or locality, your sense of community and family. The culture inverts all of them, turns them all upside down. So this culture is in the business at the moment, this anti-culture is in the business of inverting everything that it used to be, turning it all upside down. And the central thing it's inverting is Christianity, because it used to be a Christian culture. So fundamentally, the anti-culture we live in, I think, is defined by its attack on Christianity. It's not even a conscious thing for most people, it's just a thing that we do now. And so you're living in, consciously or unconsciously, a cultural space where people just don't like religion, generally, and Christianity in particular, or anything about their own past or their own culture, or anything of that kind. So, and I think that the way to do that is the way to respond to that is exactly to be able to stand up and say what you are. But to do it with a certain calmness, right? Otherwise you're really in trouble, because there's this big trap that the devil sets, right, called the culture war. And we're all supposed to jump in there and then beat up the other side, because that's really satisfying, and it feeds the algorithm and you can get loads of clicks and all the rest of it. It's soul destroying. I have this friend who's a Taoist, and she's a middle-aged woman like me, and she practiced Tai Chi for a long time. She's very, very good at it. She's a Tai Chi master. And she says that what she does when she's running an introductory session to Tai Chi in London, she'll go into the middle of the room and she'll say, right, I'm just going to stand here. Who wants to push me over? And she says all the young guys will, yeah, no problem. They all get up, because it can't be hard to push a middle-aged woman over. And they can't push her over. They get really frustrated, and they can't push her over. And the reason they can't push her over is that she knows how to stand. Right? There's a way that you can stand, because Tai Chi is all about using people's energy against them. You don't have to punch them in the face, you just use their energy against them and they can't push her over. And the rest of the class is about teaching them what that is. But she had a really great phrase for this. She said, you stand your ground with softness. Oh, that was really good. It's like a tree, right? Stand your ground with softness. If you're too rigid, you break in the wind. If you're too weak, you immediately blow over. And you don't hide under the ground either. You stand your ground with softness. And it's a really good bit of advice, and I don't always follow it, but I try to, and I think it's what we need to do. I think you can stand your ground and be seen in a culture that basically hates you, but let's do it with softness, because then people take a second look, I think, and it's like, it comes back to what we were saying earlier about actually trying to live it. It's also what Christ does, right? He stands his ground with softness, and his own way of fighting back is very peculiar, but it ultimately is victorious. So it's a paradox. But yeah, that's what I came to, just listening to that. So yeah, that's it really. Yeah, no, I'll say one more thing. Sorry, I'm going on a bit. Just talking to John about this earlier, about the importance of stories. I'm doing an event here with Martin Shaw in a couple of months, which I think I've mentioned. Martin is a storyteller, and you know, you can't. The only other thing I would say in talking about Christianity or the faith is there's no point in arguing about it, because you can't argue anyone into being religious or out of it, because you don't come into it that way. But you can tell stories, because stories always work. Not in the sense of trying to persuade people necessarily, but if you can present the Christian story in a way that people haven't heard the Christian story before, which is one thing Jonathan Pajot does, and Martin Shaw's good at it as well, and people take a second look at it, and they say, well, I haven't seen it like that before, I hadn't thought of it like that, it hadn't occurred to me, because it actually is the answer to the problems that we have in the culture, right? If we think it's the truth, which we do, then it's the answer to the problems. If it's the answer to the problems, we have to work out how to communicate it in a way that answers people's questions, which I think is the challenge. So how do you stand your ground with softness, and how do you tell the stories in a way that keeps people, you know, keeps it fresh? Those are two things maybe to take away.
Yeah. I just appreciate everyone coming out and being willing to let John Van Dock manhandle you into groups of strangers. Because that's why I bring him, actually, because he does those kind of things, and he moved the chairs. And I just did a lot of learning about your country and your culture, even though I haven't seen much of it. And you know, listening to some of your groups, I have a sense of the speed at which things changed here, and whether you think they changed for the better or for the worse, or whether you see some things are for the better and some things are for the worse. I certainly cannot be the judge of that, but I pray that, I really like that, stand with softness, and I also, another word that Paul said too was that rebuilding trust in the church. That's so absolutely vital, because in a land where you don't have the church, and all you have, let's say, is government, which is always what it is, and business, which is always what it is, you're going to need something else, and your children are going to need something else. So just encourage you all to be as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. And I'll pray that God has not by no means abandoned you or this land or your church. And I pray that you can find your way through this and come out the other side having learned the lessons that needed to be learned, and being strengthened and ready to go into the future. So, thank you.
And perhaps in addition to, or perhaps in place of you putting your email address on that list, why don't you all pull out your phones and take the spot where you enter email addresses, and then Mark is going to give you his email address, and if you want to be part of an estuary group, he will contact you. If you want to be part of an estuary group, please get your phone out, and Mark is going to read his email address to you as soon as you're all ready. Everybody ready? All right, say your email address.
Shock horror, mark@benburbpriory.com.
I can remember that without a phone.
Thank you, John.
Mark. Is that Mark with a K?
Yeah, it's Mark with a K. It's English. It's M-A-R-K.
Capital M?
No, all lowercase.
Marcus, I'd just like to say something. Obviously, I like the fact the two Pauls, but personally yourself, in an Irish context, I found this really refreshing to come to a place with so many different traditions and actually to get surprised. And I want to really thank you for facilitating that. Very much appreciated. Very much thank you.
Thank you.
I forgot to say that all these people now need to email you if you're going to have their contact information.
Yeah. So yeah, as you say,
Expect a lot of emails.
yeah. If you want to sign the sheet too, of course you can do that. And we have musicians, drinks, all that crack over in the cafe, so you're welcome to make your way over there. And thank you again. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.